Hello, I'm Arrow, and welcome to episode 30 of What I'm Thinking. In this episode, I will look at the M4 Sherman, an American medium tank with a significant historical pedigree. From a historical perspective, the medium tank M4 was specifically developed to address the biggest shortcomings of its predecessor, the medium tank M3, by replacing the sponson-mounted 75mm gun with a similar gun mounted in a 360-degree traverse turret. Design of the tank started in February of 1941. The basic chassis of the M3 was retained, including the lower hull, engine, powertrain, and suspension, although the engine compartment would be made large enough to accommodate more powerful engines when they became available. The turret ring would be enlarged to 69 inches, and the frontal armor thickness would be increased to 3 inches. The first pilot tank, designated the T6, was completed in September of 1941. You'll note that it had sponson doors on either side of the vehicle. A commander's cupola was intended, but never installed on the pilot tank. Both of these features would be removed from the final design. Also of note is the gun, which has a double counterweight installed at the end of the muzzle. This was due to the gun mount, which was designed for the new longer-barreled 75mm gun T8 rather than the gun mounted on the pilot tank. The Ordnance Department recommended standardization of the vehicle not long after the completion of the pilot, with the requirements that if possible a 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun be installed and a ball mount be provided for the bow machine gun. Production pilots were started in November of 1941. One of the immediate improvements over the M3 was a welded hull rather than riveted construction. Later models of the M4 would have a rolled and cast hull. It was around this time that the British military designated the M4 the Sherman in their tradition of naming tanks. This name would catch on with U.S. forces, and all models of the M4 series would be referred to as the General Sherman. Production of the Sherman started in February of 1942 as part of a British contract at Lima Automotive Works. A second production plant would come online a month later. At the height of production, 11 different plants were producing the M4 with almost 50,000 units completed by 1945, which made it the second most produced tank of World War II behind the Soviet T-34. The Sherman was mass-produced with strict tolerances. Parts produced at one production plant were completely interchangeable with parts from any of the other plants. This simplified repairs of the tank and the logistics related to spare parts. It was also part of the reason for the Sherman having a reputation for being easy to repair and maintain. The Sherman was continuously upgraded over the course of the war with various improvements to the suspension, engine, wet MRX, stronger armor, and improved armament. While there were numerous sub-designations of the M4, they did not necessarily indicate linear improvement. For example, the M4A1 differed from the M4 in that the upper hull was casted rather than welded, and the M4A2 only differed due to having a diesel rather than gasoline-powered engine. The Sherman first saw combat in North Africa with the British in October of 1942 at the Second Battle of El Alamein. Shermans were fielded by U.S. forces in Africa, Europe, and the Pacific Theater. Easy-8 Sherman saw service in the Korean War before being phased out in favor of the Patton Line. Upgunned Israeli Shermans saw service in the Six-Day War and Yom Kippur War. The long service life of the Sherman was due primarily to its large turret ring, which allowed for numerous armament improvements. While the Sherman was initially fitted with the 75mm gun M3, before U.S. troops landed in Europe it was upgunned to the 76mm M1. Although 76mm armed Shermans weren't standard issue on D-Day due to Army Field Forces' reluctance to train crews on the newer weapon, it could also be fitted with a 105mm howitzer. The British fitted some Shermans with a 17-pounder, which was commonly known as the Sherman Firefly. The platform was in fact so versatile that it was possible to mount the 90mm gun from the M26 Pershing in a modified turret, although this variant never saw service. There are numerous historical myths about the Sherman in regards to its performance in World War II, and Belton Cooper's memoir entitled Death Traps is the most often quoted source of misinformation. I would recommend to anyone that would like to know more about the Sherman to read an accurate, historically researched source like Armored Thunderbolts by Stephen Zaloga or Sherman, A History of the American Medium Tank by R.P. Honeycutt, among other quality sources. In World of Tanks, the M4 Sherman is an effective medium tank with decent mobility, adequate armor, and good firepower. Where the tank really shines in comparison to its peers, though, is its gun depression, which at 12 degrees is superior to every other medium tank in tier. This allows for terrain abuse tactics much like many of the higher-tiered American tanks. The Sherman is one of the few tanks in Watt that has more than one optimal gun choice with the 76mm M1A1 and the 105mm M4 howitzer. These guns are vastly different, with the fast-firing, more accurate 76mm gun versus the slow-firing, not-so-accurate 105mm derp gun. I personally prefer the 105mm gun on the Sherman. It can one-shot many lower-tiered tanks with HE and will do some damage to even the most heavily armored Tier 7 opponents you will face, unlike the 76mm gun, which is hard-pressed to do damage against similar opponents. Premium heat rounds, though, on the 105mm gun aren't reliable any longer and tend to bounce unless they hit a soft spot, while the 76mm APCR rounds have 177mm of penetration. Gun choice should be based on your preferred play style, and I recommend that players try both options to see what works best for them. I tend to play the Sherman as a forward support tank, utilizing terrain and soft cover whenever possible. I look for openings to exploit and flank so that I can put fire on softer side and rear armor. Distracted enemies are always good targets of opportunity, and this happens frequently in mid-tiered play. The 105mm gun is very potent against open-top TDs and arty, so smart backline runs can be effective if timed properly. For equipment on this tank, I recommend a rammer to improve reload times, an enhanced gun laying drive to improve aim times, and vents to improve all crew skills. Optics are a viable option instead of vents. A vertical stabilizer is not an available option on this tank. These equipment choices are optimal for the 105mm gun to speed up aiming and reload times. These same choices would also work for the 76mm gun, which has similar aim time to the 105mm gun, although it is more accurate. For crew skills, I would recommend camo first, as it's ultimately a more useful skill for a medium tank than repair. Other useful skills are Sixth Sense, Recon, Clutch Braking, Off-Road Driving, Smooth Ride, Snapshot, Situational Awareness, Safe Stowage, and Brothers in Arms. Skill prioritization should be based on future plans for the crew. Camo makes the most sense for the medium line, while repair is more useful for the Jumbo Sherman if you plan to hop over to the T29. Be warned though, going this route to the T29 makes for a miserable stock grind with the 76mm gun. The Sherman is one of my favorite Tier 5 tanks. I liked it during beta, I liked it when I played it again in 2011 after the game went live, I liked it when the 105mm heat rounds were overpowered, and I still like it now. It's reasonably sturdy, flexible, and able to hold down. While it's not as dominant as it was before the 105mm heat round nerf, it still packs a punch. The first replay that we'll be looking at is a solo battle on Erlenberg from March 30th, 2014. The map for this battle is Erlenberg, and my basic strategy for this map is as follows. In the last change to this map, the cap circles are relocated to the north and south ends, similarly to how the encounter and assault modes work. Rather than bridges being choke points that needed to be breached, this map is much more open and fluid now. The majority of the action now occurs on the flanks. In higher tiered battles, the western flank tends to see more action, since it has more cover, but pushes on the eastern flank can be successful as well. Tanks with gun depression will have a lot of success on either flank. I generally stay out of the middle of the map to avoid getting caught in crossfire from the flanks. As noted at the top of the loading screen, this is a standard battle. Reviewing tank composition for this battle reveals the following. This is a Tier 5 match with 4 Tier 5s on each team. My team has 2 Tier 4s while the enemy team has 4. My team has 9 Tier 3s while the enemy team has 7. No arty in this match. I recognize one player in this battle, and that's Duke Wolf on my team. He's a former clanmate of mine when we were both in VPG. As the battle loads in, I recognize that the enemy team is lacking in armor, which is a big advantage for my tank. My plan is to go east into the hills and utilize the Sherman's gun depression to force a breakthrough on that flank. Once the flank is cleared, I'll have a lot of flexibility on where to go next. As the match gets underway, I'm going to start heading east. I was going to knock down the equipment racks, but our Ram 2 got there first. Our Ram 2 is turned in front of me. I bump him slightly. Keep moving. Now our Panzer 2G rams me in the side. You'll note that that damage wasn't counted against me. That's been fixed in the latest patch. In the past, I would end up paying his repairs, even though that I wasn't the one doing the team damage. Gonna head up into the hills now, next to our T-46. There's a Panzer 1C streaking down the 4 line. A Panzer 1C is deep in our backfield. For the time being, I'm going to keep pushing this flank rather than react to a single tank. I'll keep an eye on the minimap though, just in case the 1C goes on a rampage. Got a Panzer 2G leading the way, he's on top of the hill. T-46 next to me, we've got a Churchill 3 and a TD2 in the back. Got some decent firepower on this flank. Spot a Panzer 2G. He is on the other side of the hill. He exposes himself. Line him up. Knock him down with one shot. Continuing to press forward. Got a T-28 spotted on the opposite ridge. Line him up. I one-shot him. Backing back into cover as the dead tank had spotted me. M3 Lee climbing the hill, and I get a flank shot and knock him down. You can see the power of the 105mm gun as I'm easily able to rip these opponents apart. I'm going to continue to climb the hill and use my gun depression to shoot over the top at their Panzer 3-4. And I get a hit. Lining up the Sal 40. And I knock him down. The Panzer III-4 is on fire and he burns down. With the eastern flank broken, I will continue to push forwards towards the enemy cap. We still have enough defenders in the west that I'm not going to immediately fall back. I want to keep my team moving so that we can flank behind the enemies in the west, as we currently have a 3-tank lead. I'm just behind our T-46. Also have the T-82 and the Ram 2 following me. Spot their DW2, and I knock them down on the run. That is pretty rare for the Sherman, especially with the 105mm gun. It is typically not that accurate on the move. With our team failing in the west, I make the call to cap. This will drag some enemies back towards us in an attempt to defend cap. I will need to be careful because there is almost no cover in this area, although I am at full health and most of the remaining enemies are lower tier. I'm going to the back side of cap because it's slightly lower, but I'm going to pull forward and see if I can get a shot at the Chiha. Lining them up, and I miss, likely over the top. I'm going to pull around to the far side of the building as I'm anticipating based on his movements that's where he's headed. Lining them up, and I get a hit. He bounces the return shot on me, and I back out, and our T-46 knocks him down. I take a flank hit from the Stug 3, who then knocks down our T-46, which means he is overlooking cap. I'm going to have to be careful. I am keeping an eye on the right-hand side, and I spot their Type T-34 coming back. Snap a shot off and get a hit. Turning my armor towards the Type T-34. I'm going to use this wreck in front of me for cover temporarily from the Stug 3. The Type T-34 tries to pop his turret up, but sees I'm aimed on him, so he backs off. I'm going to hold position here behind this wreck, hopefully to get myself some cover from the Stug 3. The Type T-34 comes around the hill. I get hit again from the Stug 3, but I'm able to knock the Type T-34 down. The enemy team is down to 2 tanks. We've got 3 on cap. I do not think the Stug can see me right now as he's not shooting at me. Their medium M2 is just below the castle. I'm lining up the Stug, and I get a hit. And we're able to cap out the base for the win. Looking at the after action screens, I destroyed 6 tanks for a top gun, damaged 3 more, hit 10 of 11 shots for 2,117 points of damage, and earned 1,719 experience before the double. I earned a high caliber medal and an ace tanker badge. Overall, I noticed right off the bat that the enemy team was lacking in hard-shelled tanks, making them vulnerable to my 105mm gun. I pushed the eastern flank under the assumption that the enemy's top tiers would go the other direction. This move paid off as I quickly forced a breakthrough on the flank. Rather than falling back to help the western flank, I pushed my teammates onwards towards the enemy cap. With the western flank failing, I made the decision to cap the enemy base in order to draw them back. As the enemy trickled back, we were able to take them out one by one, even though the cap circle had almost no cover. The second replay they'll be looking at is a solo battle on Lakeville from March 23, 2014. As noted at the top of the loading screen, this is a standard battle. Reviewing tank composition for this battle reveals the following. This is a Tier 5 battle with 7 Tier 5s, 5 Tier 4s, and 3 Tier 2s on each team. Both teams have a single Tier 4 arty piece. I don't recognize anyone in this battle. As the battle loads in, I've made the decision to go to town. If any friendlies go up the middle road, I'll have opportunities to provide fire from the back of town. As I've noted many times before, the valley is a fail flank on this map, but I'm expecting a lot of my teammates to go that way regardless, especially when our KV-1 pings the valley a number of times right before the end of the countdown. As the battle gets underway, I'm going to start heading to the east. Get caught up in some traffic. As I break out of the traffic, get underway here. You can see that our team is heavily distributing to the west, which is the fail flank. I'm going to keep heading east into town. It doesn't take long to see how poorly my team is distributed, with almost 2/3 of the team, including our KV-1, going into the western valley. In a higher tiered battle, this distribution would more than likely result in a rout of my team. Got a Martyr 38T spotted in the middle. See if I can line him up, but he is behind the rocks. Snap off a shot but miss. At the range we're dealing with here, I'm going to be hard-pressed to get hits. Our Churchill 3 is pushing up the middle, likely into something other than just that Martyr, as he's taking multiple hits. maneuvering further towards town to try to get more of an angle on these enemies, but they're behind the rocks. I can't get any shots on them. Looks like our Churchill 3 is going down, and he gets popped. The enemy has pushed 3 tank destroyers up the middle. I'm going to stay here at the back of town and see if they expose themselves, although at this distance I'm going to be hard-pressed to get hits. I'm going to turn back and move up to this rock just to my front left. Use that as cover between my shots. I'm going to try to line up the AT-2. My first shot is a critical hit, no damage. Likely tracked him. Try to get another hit. You can see the big issue with the 105mm gun in this situation. The hard-shelled AT-2 barely takes any damage from my HE shells. Heat rounds would definitely bounce in this situation. And I'm trying to line them up one more time, and that's a wild miss over the top. The enemy still has 3 tanks in the middle. Their 3001H is maneuvering through town, so I'm going to try to get some shots on him. My first shot was a miss. Second shot is a hit, and I let him on fire. Looks like he had a fire extinguisher, he put it out. Martyr 38T is pushing the middle, I switch back. And I get the final hit and knock him down. Our Wolverine knocks down the 3001H. Keeping an eye on the AT-2, snapped a shot off and missed. The enemy still has the Electo and the AT-2 in the middle. Looks like they only have 2 tanks left in town. The Electo is starting to move forward a little bit, but I am keeping an eye on the AT-2. Now I'm keeping an eye on the Electo, trying to switch back and forth. And the Electo starts to push forward, line them up, snap off a shot, and I knock him down. The enemy has a Panzer III-4 coming up the road towards me. I get out in the open, line them up, snap a shot off and knock him down. Take a flank hit from their Stug 3. With the enemy's middle push stopped and just the AT-2 remaining, I'm going to push into town. The enemy seems to not have much in town, and I should be able to push through and get into a flanking position near their base. And flank out their T-40. AT-2 is still in the middle, but with him being alone and as slow as he is and not moving, I'm better off getting into town and beginning to flank the enemies at their base. Pushing up by the church, our M2 medium is one-shottable, so is their T-40, but I'm going to push around and flank. I do not want to take any more damage than I have to right now. We do lose our M2 medium. Circling around behind the T-40. I light him up and I knock him down. With town now cleared, I'm planning to move into the K8 area and get rear shots at their AT-2 as well as hopefully spot their other tanks. I'm just below half health, so I need to be careful, especially against their KV-1 that was last spotted at J2. Their other KV is in the valley. He has beaten down our entire valley push. Currently tied with 6 tanks remaining each. Carefully moving up along this ridge. I want to try to get behind this rock and bush here. See if I can light anything up. Backing up to see if anyone's on the middle road. The Martyr 2 has pushed up along the lake side of town and he is up at E7. Which leaves just the Stug 3, Arty, and KV-1 at base. The Martyr 2 gets knocked down by our M7. I line up the Stug and I knock him down with one shot. The only danger still in front of me is the potential that there's a KV-1 up there. And Arty, of course. I'm trying to light the Arty right now. And I spot Arty. Trying to line him up. And I go with a fully aimed reticule, but I miss. He's backing slowly out of my line of fire, and our Arty knocks down their Arty. With just the KV-1, I'm going to move up to the house at K4 and see if I can spot him. Our Wolverine knocks down their KV-1. Their KV-1 knocked down our Artie. The second KV-1 has moved into the valley, which means cap is empty. The enemy is down to just 2 tanks, but with both them being hard-shelled, I make the call to cap rather than chase after them. Our team is lacking in armor and firepower, making the AT-2 a very tough opponent. I'll keep an eye on the middle just in case the AT-2 decides to turn back and defend cap. It's highly unlikely that the enemy KV-1 could make it back even if he turned back now. While there is a very good chance I could catch the KV-1 and the AT-2 by surprise, it's just not worth it. The KV-1 appears to be falling back, although there is pretty much no chance with the terrain in the valley that he can make it back. The AT-2 is pushed all the way up to C4, which means there's no chance he's going to make it back to base. Then I'm actually going to turn around and prepare just in case the KV-1 makes it. Although I don't think there's much of a chance with only 45 seconds left on the cap. Our M7, which rotated all the way around to this side of the map, has now headed up the middle to take on the AT-2, which I think is kind of a mistake. He should have jumped on cap with me and helped me cap out the base. And I tried to signal to him to get him to come cap the base with me, but he's pressing forward anyway. The KV-1 is pressed up to C2, so there's no chance the enemy can get back and defend cap. Even if they both jump on cap together in the next couple seconds, there's no way they can cap out the base before me. And looks like our M7's going to end up going down here, pushing in on them. And I cap out the base for the win. Looking at the after action screens, I destroyed 5 tanks, damaged 2 more, hit 9 of 18 shots for 1,023 points of damage and earned 1,294 experience before the triple. I also earned an invader medal. Overall, my team distributed poorly at the beginning of the match by sending 9 tanks into the Western Valley. The Lakeville map is usually won or lost in town. While I have seen the occasional valley push succeed, the terrain is poor and makes all maneuvering slow. The enemy pushed the middle early on, and I stayed in the back of the map to get crossfire on their positions. Once the middle push was stopped, I began to push through town. Once the enemies in town were defeated, I pushed through to the southeastern corner of the map, getting into a flanking position on the enemy base. After I cleared their tank destroyers and Artie, I pushed into the enemy cap. My decision to cap was based on the enemy having 2 hard-shell tanks remaining that I wasn't particularly confident that I could defeat, especially at half health. I also wasn't particularly confident in my teammates, so I took the sure win in this case. Thank you for watching this episode of What I'm Thinking. Stay tuned for another episode soon. In the next episode, I will take a look at another American World War II veteran, the venerable M18 Hellcat.